And welcome in to another episode of Building the Board, brought to you by OnTap Sportsnet. My name is Quinten Krzysko. I am joined by Steve Letizia and Jacob Infante this fine afternoon, evening, whatever you're going to call it, to talk about some defensive tackle prospects for the Chicago Bears. Starting with Steve, how are you doing this evening?
Doing pretty good. Love talking defensive linemen in general. It's obviously a huge need for the Bears, so excited to talk with Q and Jacob as well. Jacob's the OG Bears Twitter guy, so Bears draft guy. So really excited to hear what you guys' thoughts more than anything.
Jacob, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I mean, like Steve said, it's exciting to be able to talk defensive linemen here. It's nuts to think the draft's only a month away. But it's been, a fun process the whole way through, and I'm excited to just set up shop and talk ball with you guys.
Yeah, so anyone who hasn't kept up with our Building the Board project this year, we're doing these episodes a little differently. We're bringing some March Madness vibes to it, where if you're not watching and only listening, we have a bracket up on the screen, 1 through 16. We got matchups going through, and we're going to try to select the Bears who are the players, not the Bears, the players who are most likely to become Bears. So hopefully the winner is the eventual Chicago Bear that we're talking about. But when we're kicking this thing off, looking at our 116 matchup here. Number 1 seed is Kayden McDonald, and number 16 seed is David Gusta. I'm gonna toss this one to Jacob first. Jacob, when you look at this matchup, where does your head go?
Yeah, so I mean, I see both of these guys as more run stopping defensive tackles than anything. More so than your, explosive penetrating type of defensive lineman. Neither of them necessarily wow me as an athlete, but I think that McDonald is, well, for one, for me, he looks stronger on tape. He's more, he's got a better understanding of how to use his hands to free himself up and make tackles against the run. And I think that there's a little bit more pass rushing upside here. So Gusta is someone where I think he could be a solid rotational backup in that day 3 kind of range. I think that there's a future for him in the league. I mean, he's got a solid enough anchor, and he does a pretty good job of staying low at the point of attack, keeping his weight underneath him and his pads low. But I think that there's a lack of pass rushing upside with him just because he's not a very explosive, agile athlete on tape. And it's some of the similar concerns with McDonald, but I think McDonald's a little bit quicker. He's a little bit twitchier. And I think that his strengths are stronger than Gusta's. So I'm going, McDonald here. If we're going strictly off of like who fits the Bears better, uh, I don't think there's a perfect fit with either of the two, but I'd take McDonald here strictly out of purely talent. Like if McDonald's the pick at 25, I'd be happy with it personally. I don't know how you guys feel about it, even if it's not a the flashiest, like 1-to-1 translation compared to what Dennis Allen has historically liked in defensive tackles, from a physical, archetype, from a playing style perspective. But McDonald's just a really good run defender. That was a weakness of the Bears defensive line. I'd go McDonald here.
Steve, how are you feeling?
Yeah. I mean, McDonald. I mean, if we're just going the better football player, I think it's clearly, Kayden McDonald. Like Jacob said, the fit isn't maybe perfect for what Dennis Allen wants, but they are bringing him in for a 30 visit, so there is some sort of interest there. The Bears don't always draft guys they bring on 30 visits, but the fact that they're bringing him in shows that maybe there's a little bit more interest there than we originally thought when we were talking kind of fits for Dennis Allen. But Kayden McDonald is going to step in right away and improve the Bears' run defense and has the potential to really change the Bears' entire defense with what he can do in the run game. He's consistently resetting the line of scrimmage, really sturdy frame, thick lower half, 6'2", 326. His upside against the run is huge. I think I have it here, the best run stop rate in the nation at 13.3%. I think that was like the best by like a full percent or something like that. So like you said, I think he does have a little bit more quickness than like you would originally kind of suspect. From a guy who's like a true nose tackle, 6'2", 326. I did think he played with a little bit more quickness than you expect. Solid get off at the line of scrimmage at the snap of the ball. So I think he'd be a hell of a Bear, like you said. I don't know if he has the pass rush upside really in him, but you don't really need him to be, a huge sack production guy to affect the pass. You can still push the pocket, um, you know, make it difficult for quarterbacks to step up, and then it makes Montez Sweat's job easier, makes Austin Booker's job easier, makes any other DN they might draft or acquire job easier because they don't have that pocket to step up in. So I think I'd be perfectly fine with him at 25. The reason I haven't really mocked him there is because I didn't think he was a great fit. But if the Bears go that way, I'd be perfectly happy with that. With Gusta, I thought he played with a little bit more quickness than Jacob was saying. I one thing that really stands out with him is just the violence he plays with in his hands. I'm going to be higher on Gusta too. I think you're higher on Gusta as well. Um, I thought he was a pretty good athlete, especially in a straight line. Where he gets really into trouble is he can get into the backfield, with a decent first step, but then he just cannot change directions whatsoever. There are times where a quarterback would just take one step to the left and he would just be completely lost. But I really like him as well. There was one game against Tennessee was one of the best D-line tape I've watched this year, to be honest. He had like 3 plays at the goal line where he knocked the center back into the backfield like 2 to 3 yards. And this is a guy who's playing zero tech at I have him at 308 pounds at the combine. So I don't think that was really a great role for him. I do think he could be more of like a one tech. I think he could play maybe some 3 technique, just as a guy who kind of rotates between there. So I think there's some potential there as well. But I think just the fact that they brought him in for a 30 visit, I think they would probably lead Kayden McDonald here.
Yeah, and I'm never going to be upset with a pick like Kayden McDonald at 25, right? But I do feel a little bit like a FOMO on the thought of it, where it's just like, do I want Eddie Goldman at 25? Like Eddie Goldman's he was a really good Bear, right? But like, I just don't know. It's hard for me to think through that. But like, McDonald is a good run stuffer. Like I'm lower on him than consensus just because it is that I struggle to see that pass rush upside, but he's going to be a good football player in this league. He's going to walk in and be a floor setter for your D line, for your run defense. Gusta is really interesting to me, and it's not. If you asked me 2 years ago, I probably would have hated Gusta's tape, but because I've really tried to dig in on seeing through the Dennis Allen lens with this draft class, and as I've done that, like I ended up with a really high grade on Gusta's tape because I just think he's a great fit for what Dennis Allen wants to do with how much he wants to stunt, how much he wants guys who can just jump around gaps with lateral burst. That's something I thought that he had in spades. It might not be agility, but his ability to be almost like not moving to moving laterally across a gap is really impressive to me. And when you combine that with his hand fighting, like to me, when I'm looking for the Dennis Allen defensive tackles, I'm looking for guys who can disengage easily because Dennis Allen wants them, from my view, he wants them to engage the tackle or engage the lineman in front of them, read, run, or pass, and then react to what they read with a stunt one way or a motion a different way. Like their run defense movement is going to be different than their pass rush movement. And so to me, when I watch Gusta, his ability to disengage and his ability to be able to jump into a stunt really quickly seemed really good. So I think that's why I'm higher on him than everybody, just because I tried to look at it through that lens. But ultimately, I mean, I think if the Bears hadn't had a combine meeting with Kayden McDonald and a 30 visit with Kayden McDonald, I'd probably hammer the table here more for David Gusta, but because they've shown that initial interest, I think Kayden McDonald's a guy to push through.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat there. I think if they didn't have those meetings, I would be the same boat going for Gusta. But the fact that they did, there has to be some sort of interest there, unless it's some smoke screen that they're trying to get across. I don't know, but
yeah,
I would say that it shows legitimate interest.
Okay, so now we're going to move on to our 8-9 matchup. And the first guy, the number 8 seed here is Darrell Jackson Jr. out of Florida State, and the 9 seed is Rayshaun Benny out of Michigan. Steve, do you want to jump off with this one?
Sure. Start with Darrell Jackson. So I really like Darrell Jackson coming into this year. I was probably a little bit too high on him, but the first thing that just pops out with him is just how gigantic he is as a human being. 6'5.5", 315, 34 and 3/4 arms, 11-inch hands, and like all of that shows up when you watch him. Really heavy hands, physical at the point of attack. Like when he gets his hands on the offensive linemen, I don't care how big they are, they're getting jolted back into the backfield. That means, I mean, like everything, all these strengths I'm reading here in front of me, I have my notes, is just all based on just size, power, and just length. All that is just kind of what jumps out on the tape. So that being said, I think he's a below average athlete. You know, he really struggled to move this year. I thought in 24 he was moving a little bit a little bit better. But this year it just seemed like, I don't know if he had a bad weight or whatever it was, but he just seemed like very labored movements. You know, plays too tall at times. Anytime you're a guy who's over 6'5", like pad level is going to be an issue. That's something that definitely shows up with Darrell Jackson. There are times when he's just absolutely, dominant. And I'm talking more about his 24 tape. I saw more dominance then, where he's throwing guys around like rag dolls. But they're just few and far between. There are also times where he just kind of disappears. He's never going to be a guy who, has like, really stuffs the stat sheet with sacks or tackles. But I think he can be a guy who just takes up space and eats blockers. Probably not, I would say definitely not what the Bears are looking for. But he's still an intriguing player. With Rayshaun Benny, I think he fits a lot more with what Dennis Allen wants. I mean, with Jackson, we were talking about Kayden McDonald, like, oh, I don't know, maybe. With Jackson, I just don't think there's any way that the Bears would be interesting. But Rayshaun Benny is a guy who I really like as well. Really good run defender. Really, really good run defender. He's actually been, like, if you look at his PFF grades in the past 2.5 years, one of the elite run defenders in college football. For the last 2.5 years, he's got really long arms, for his size, 6'3", 298, but he's got almost 34-inch arms. He uses them really well. The pass rush, plan and potential really is where it's lacking there. I think he's got some potential to grow as a pass rusher, because I do think he's athletic and moves pretty well, but he just has no plan. If his first, move doesn't work, if his first step doesn't hit, then he just kind of gets lost in the shuffle. But I think he can come in, be a really good run defender, and then hopefully you can kind of bring out that pass rush potential from him down the road.
Jacob, how are you feeling about this matchup?
Yeah, so I'm kind of in a similar boat here. I think that, so in a broader perspective, not narrowing down, specific to one team's needs, I do have a higher grade on Jackson than I do on Benny. But I think looking at what Jackson's good at and what his weaknesses are, I think there's, definitely a little bit of a, an odd fit in Chicago for sure. I think that, like Steve said, when you have like such a tall defensive lineman, a guy he measured 6'5.5", close to 6'6", it's, you see it with like Javon Dexter, for example, all the time, different kind of the body type, but on the field, but still like taller guys, it's naturally tougher for them to get low at the point of attack, to get that bend in their knees and to win with leverage, properly. Jackson, I think, really fit that bill. He's got that raw strength. He's got, the size, the length, the grip strength, the physicality. And, there have been times where, like in game, like I know at one point, like his max was 20.6 miles per hour. They timed him at in full pads. And so there's raw speed with Jackson for sure. But I think that it doesn't always pop up just because, the get off is a little too slow, where, he has that build-up speed, which is a little bit rare. Usually it's the other way around with defensive tackles. I think Jackson has that build-up speed, but his short area quickness is lacking a little bit. And I say that I don't necessarily think Benny's a tremendous athlete at defensive tackle either. I think that, I think there's reason to have some concerns for a guy who's sub 300 pounds to not necessarily fire off the ball, or to I mean, his acceleration's all right. It comes down to the chase down athleticism just isn't all that great to me. But I see a lot of the same strengths that Steve mentioned. I really like what he brings to the table against the run. I think he has a good there's good hand activity there. There's good, length and, all things considered. I come away, yeah, he has a good understanding of, all right, a runner's coming up my gap. This is where and how I need to free up my hands and be able to make a play against the run. I think Benny does a good job of that. Uh, specific to this matchup, I lean Benny just as a fit for Chicago. I don't think he's a seamless fit necessarily because if we are going down the more explosive penetrating defensive line types, then I don't think either of these guys are going to be your top choice. But I do think that Benny has. I think his weaknesses are a little more manageable in this system, whereas Jackson just feels like an odd fit. He's a really talented football player, and Jackson, he's a physical freak. But I kind of lean Benny here just as a fit for Chicago because I think Jackson's his weaknesses are just it doesn't really match up well with what I get the sense Chicago wants up the middle.
Yeah, and that's really what I think a lot of it comes down to is really like I thought Jackson was a really pretty impressive athlete for his size, but like I just don't know if he fits. And he's so raw in a lot of ways. Like he's just a barbarian out there in my mind. Like he's just out there smacking heads and like it might be good, it might be bad, but he's gonna come out standing and someone else is gonna be on the ground. I just don't know if it's gonna help the play. Like he's still learning how to play football. Which I love. I love those type of prospects typically too more than I should. But at the end of the day, I don't think Dennis Allen cares about those type of prospects because he wants guys who control the point of attack and execute a system correctly. That sounds a lot more like Rayshaun Benny to me, a guy who was asked to run a lot of stunts at Michigan, a guy who has some of that athletic ability that I think Dennis Allen is looking for. And, my main, like, if I was just looking at the run reps, Rayshaun Benny's film would be really, really highly graded for me. He played very well against the run, made a lot of splash plays. I don't know why that stuff doesn't show up on the pass because a lot of his splash plays, they are athletic based. They are like him beating a guy to a spot, him finding a way past the blocker. And to me, that should translate with pass rush, but it doesn't with him. And it's odd to me because the only way I can logic that is like, it must be because the blocker is not moving forward towards him. Like he's really able to take advantage of that blocker's momentum going the other way and against a run block. Against a pass block, maybe he's not quite that level of athlete to get there. But to me, I mean, I think Rayshaun Benny is the guy who has to go forward here because, like you guys said, Jackson probably just isn't really a realistic option for them. All right, we'll go ahead and move Rayshaun Benny forward, and we'll get to our 5-12 matchup. 5 seed out of Texas Tech is Lee Hunter. 12 seed out of Clemson is DeMonte Capehart. So we got the battle of 2 nose tackles here. I'll toss this one back to Jacob first. Jacob, what do you think here?
Yeah, so I'm very happy that Capehart ended up having the combine that he had because I think that he was kind of fading into the background a little too much. He's not a flawless prospect at defensive tackle by any means, but I think that I think he was much more physically talented than a lot of people were giving him credit for. And I think part of it was just, he was solid for a long time at Clemson. He was never amazing necessarily when you watch him on tape, but he was someone who was still contributing a decent amount. Uh, I came away really impressed with just the violence he plays with in the run game. I think that, especially going back, admittedly, I watched a little bit more of his 2024 tape than his 2025 stuff, but I came away impressed with how he battles through contact, the play strength that he has when he locks up with the opposing blockers. I think he's able to push the pocket pretty well with speed to power, just keeping his legs churning and having, those active hands. And I think, his first step quickness is really impressive for that big of a guy. And the testing showed, a 1.7 10-yard split, a 4.85 40-yard dash. Really, those are legit numbers for a guy who's 6'5" and 313 pounds. Long arms, huge hands. I will say that I do have Hunter as a higher like overall prospect, but I think it goes back to, does he fit what the Bears want? I don't necessarily think so. I mean, for one, the testing, I know that's not a total disqualifier, but the testing wasn't very good. I think the tape is definitely better, and it's one of those situations where uh, just the relative athletic score metric, a lot of people are going to point to that. It's not necessarily very kind to most nose tackles, just because that's it doesn't truly reflect what all their value brings to the table. uh Hunter, I think, has good size adjusted quickness. He's a little, yeah, a little big around the middle for my liking. I want to see if possible to lean, get some of that, turn that into lean mass. For a bigger guy though, he does move pretty well. You see some of the straight line quickness when he gets out in the open field. uh I think that there's some flashes of good hand movement with Hunter. I think he's got he used the push pull well. I like his swim move. There are a couple instances throughout games where it's like, all right, he can make this work. Uh, I For a guy who's as big as he is, his play strength is good. I think it could be a little better. And chalk that up to whatever. Maybe center of gravity can get a little bit lower, do whatever you want. But I think that still, Hunter's a lot on potential right now. I'm specific for Chicago. I'm leaning Capehart here on this one, honestly.
Steve, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I feel very similarly to Jacob. Yeah, Lee Hunter, he obviously tested as a really bad athlete, like Jacob said. That isn't necessarily the worst thing for a nose tackle, because a lot of good nose tackles have tested poorly and turned into really good pros. I did think that, like you said, I thought he flashed more quickness than his testing would than his testing showed. I'm not going to say he's like the most athletic or quickest defensive tackle, but I thought he was going to be at least a little bit more respectable than that. And then the one thing I liked about him is I feel like he is pretty a smart player. Like, he identifies down blacks pretty quickly. He, sees the double teams coming and can adjust to them, pretty well. But yeah, I kind of agree. I think for the Bears specifically, I don't see Lee Hunter being a great fit. But I do like DeMonte Capehart. DeMonte Capehart's interesting because I do think he's a better fit, but he's also a 6'5" defensive tackle, 6'5", 315, which isn't necessarily what Dennis Allen looks for. But when you look at like the traits that he brings to the table, I think that is more what Dennis Allen, looks for, with talking about his, initial quickness off the snap, the ability to just kind of shoot a gap and get into the backfield and be disruptive. I think he flashes some of the highest level plays you'll see in this draft class. Like, if you just grade the flashes, like, you're gonna be like, oh my god, this guy's a first round talent. But I feel like he just disappears for like long stretches of times where he does like nothing then and just kind of gets lost in the shuffle. The thing about him is, he's going to be 4 years old as a rookie. He played he didn't play a lot of snaps in college despite playing, I believe, 5 or 6 years. So that's kind of just like a question mark I have for him. Why wasn't he playing more? Why wasn't he more dominant on a snap to snap basis when you have all this athletic, upside, and you have this great size and this great strength and great power? Why weren't you more dominant at a younger age? And even when you were, over prospect, it was still kind of hit or miss there. But I still like the player. I do think that he would be, if just between Lee Hunter and DeMonte Capehart, I do think Capehart is more likely for the Bears.
Yeah, I agree. I think Capehart's the guy we're pushing through here, but I mean, it's weird, man. Like, 892 snaps across 57 games, 6 seasons. It's weird. And like, I remember 3 years ago, the first time this guy went on my radar, seeing a run rep from him, be like, oh shit, okay, this guy, like, I gotta watch out for this guy. And he's been on my draft list every year since then. And I was like, when is this guy finally going to come out? Why doesn't he play football? Like, I don't know if there were any injuries there or anything, but like, like you said, Steve, Capehart's like highlight film is up there with anybody. It's insane. Some of the run reps that this guy has, some of the just like the pure power and burst that he generates is wild. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit on Lee Hunter because I am a Texas Tech grad and I do love me some Lee Hunter. He's a very unique player, right? Like, he's, as a nose tackle, I feel like he wins in weird ways with a lot of upper body strength and torque that, like, I've said this a few times already, but like I'm not saying he is this guy, but he reminds me of Akeem Hicks in some ways. The way that he's able to just like manhandle guys with his upper body and use that core strength to torque guys out of position and just like get free is really impressive and something that you don't see a lot of defenders doing. I do think he does have some skinny legs though for a nose tackle, which is like interesting. I'm not sure I'd say that that's the same as Akeem. I do think Akeem had a little bit skinnier legs, but like he wasn't skinny anywhere. But anyways, I'm getting off topic here. We're going to push DeMonte Capehart through here because I think that he's a guy who's going to Dennis Allen is much more likely to pick him in the fourth round if he still gets there. That's kind of where I thought he should be before the athletic testing. Then he has to take Lee Hunter in the first or second round. But let's keep this moving. Let's get to our 4-13 matchup. 4 seed out of Georgia, we have Christen Miller, and 13 seed out of Mizzou, we have Chris McClellan. Steve, I'll toss this one to you first.
All right. First of all, I got to give a shout out to Q because the first time I watched Christen Miller, I liked him, but I was a little bit lower on him. Q made me go back and watch his tape again, and I'm glad I did because I did like him a little bit more on the second watch. I do think he's probably a player that's definitely in play for the Bears at 25. But yeah, really good size, and he carries his weight really well. He's just under 6'4" and 321 pounds. The 321 pounds, I think that was at the combine. I believe he played, or at least was listed lighter than that. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. We didn't get any testing from him, but at least interesting to hear what his like playing weight was actually at. But if he's 321 pounds, like I said, he carries it really well. I would have guessed he was closer to like 310. But really quick to get his hands up against the run, really strong upper body, length, has great length, uses it well, gets good extension through his lower body, can stack and shed, heavy hands at the point of attack that deliver a jolt. A lot of really good stuff that you see, especially as a run defender there. As a pass rusher, I think he moves really well and uses his hands really well. And those hands, bring some violence with them. He had some reps against Alabama. I know, Parker Brailsford is a good center. He is a little bit lighter, but he was kind of just dominating him. So that was really nice to see. I think he's also pretty versatile as well. I think he could play a variety of different alignments along the defensive line. It's not like a Lee Hunter where you're going to, he's a nose tackle. I think Christen Miller could play some 3-tech. He could play some 1-tech. You can kind of move him around. I did find that he was maybe on the ground a little bit too much, for my liking still, even on my second watch. But it's not like, and he can kind of get moved off the ball on down blocks and double teams. I don't think that's a strength issue. The guy is clearly very strong. I think it's more of he just doesn't anticipate, doesn't really know what the offensive line is going to be doing, doesn't really anticipate the double teams and combo blocks, like I said, with Lee Hunter. So I think it's more of just an inexperience on those issues. It's definitely not a strength issue. So that's an issue that I think he has, but is fixable. The other thing I thought he kind of struggled to find the ball at times. He disengages pretty quickly, but doesn't really know, where the ball carrier is going to be. But overall, I think a play that's really, really interesting. And then with McClellan, I think McClellan's being a little bit underrated. I think most people have him kind of on day 3, and he might get drafted there, but I think he can really, come in and be a good player for you. Pro-ready frame, really good strength at point of attack. Like I said, solid block awareness, kind of like Lee Hunter. Above average power as a power rusher, and capable of walking back the pocket with a bull rush. His pad level rises. Like this is an issue that kind of we're gonna be talking about a lot of these guys, especially guys that are taller. He's almost 6'4", 313 pounds. So his pad level rises often, but he has really long arms, 34-inch arms, and I believe he had. I don't have his hand size here, but I believe he had pretty big hands, and that was pretty obvious too, kind of when watching him. There was one rep against Auburn, I believe it was. Like, don't quote me on that, but where it was pass rush rep, where he actually showed really good bend to get in the backfield, kind of through contact and bend around the guard to get a sack. And I thought that was one of the most impressive reps I saw, pass rush reps from any D tackle, this year. I'm not gonna say he's the most bendy and flexible guy, because I do think flexibility can kind of be an issue for him at times, but that particular rep always stands out anytime I talk about Chris McClellan. When we're talking about best fit, I think both these guys could potentially be a fit, but I think I'd have to give it to Christen Miller in terms of the Bears.
Jacob, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I hate to have to vote against my fellow Mizzou product, but I'm leaning Miller here too for a lot of the reasons that Steve said. I think that Miller, it's an interesting case because the pass rushing production isn't there. I mean, it's 4 sacks in his entire collegiate career. I think part of that is he's a little bit raw in that regard. I, want to see him, work off the counter move a little bit better. If the first move doesn't win, he can get a little lost sometimes. But I think there's a good amount of potential for him to grow as a pass rusher. And I think part of that lack of development is just because Georgia, especially, rotates their defensive line so heavily. So Miller might not have gotten as much of a chance on a year to year, on a week to week basis to grow in that regard. But I love what he brings to the table as a run defender. The combine weight was a bit surprising. I had him down like before the season at 305. So to have him, come in the 320 range, I'm with Steve, and that it's going to be interesting to see what people think is, in the pros or in what he wants his place weight to be at the next level too. But I see some quickness on tape. I see the physicality, I see better weight distribution than I do with McClellan. And no, like I like McClellan a lot. I have him as a, like you guys were saying, kind of the consensus is him as like an early day 3. I have him like just inside my top 100. So in like that fringe round 3, round 4 kind of grade where like if someone uses a comp 3rd round pick on him, I think that'd be a good value. Uh Long arms, massive hands. I checked his 11-inch hands, which is batty. I think for such a thickly built, like a big defensive lineman, he's got good straight line speed, all things considered. But yeah, I think the pad level, the change of direction is an issue. Uh, is a little just hit or miss. I think, some of the hand usage that I see from him, it's not bad necessarily, but I think that there needs to be a little bit more consistency as far as his plan as a pass rusher. Uh, but I mean, both these guys are talented players for sure. But if we're going for purely Bears fits, I'm taking Miller here. I think that you can't go wrong. Like I think they're both pretty good players, and if the Bears end up taking McClellan, like late in the 3rd round after not taking a defensive tackle before then, I'd be perfectly content with that. But I think Miller's a better fit, and truth be told, I'd be satisfied with him at 25. That's not the guy I'm pounding the table for, but if that is the pick, I'm like, all right, well, the defensive line definitely got better. So I'm taking Miller here.
Yeah, and so with McClellan, I feel like I've gone back and forth a little on him, and like where my grade sits right now is right where you guys were saying. It's that, yeah, I have him at a 6.748 or something, which 675 is my cutoff for top 100. So he's right there on the edge of it. But like I really liked his Kansas game, and then I really didn't like his Alabama game, and that concerned me because Alabama has what I would consider to be closer to a pro offensive line. So I need to go back and watch at least one more game of him to really kind of finalize my thoughts. But like Steve got to, I've been kind of banging the Christian Miller, Christian, I'm not sure which way it is, but drum here. When I flipped on this guy's tape, I said, okay, this is a 5-star athlete. Like I didn't feel like I needed the testing. I felt like this guy has athletic traits that not a lot of guys have at that size. Like thinking he's like 305, 310, like Jacob said. He measured at 321. Like I'm guessing that was more about teams might see him as a nose tackle and he's going to weigh in like a nose tackle then. Because I think he has a pretty shapeable body, shapeable frame where he can do a lot of different things. But ultimately where I'm landing with this is at pick 25, I'm not expecting to get a big star, like instant star player. We're picking up the scraps here, especially in this class at pick 25. But I'm getting a premier athlete with premier violence in his game at defensive tackle. If you hand me a defensive tackle who is violent, athletic, and smart, I trust coaches to figure it out, man. Like that's where I'm landing with this because I can see in his game he's smart. He runs a ton of stunts. That D line does not have an easy job at Georgia. They do so many different things, so many read-based things that I think really fits what Dennis Allen does. So to me, it's an easy pick. It's Christen Miller. And I hope he gets to 25. I think that the consensus is a little low on him right now.
Yeah. And he's only 20 years old, I believe. I could be wrong there, but I'm pretty sure he's only 20. And Chris McClellan is like 24, so there's quite a big difference there. And I mean, and Miller's the better player at 20. So when Chris Miller's 24, he's going to be even better.
All right, so let's move this along to the number 6 seed Gracen Halton up against the number 11 seed Landon Robinson. This is a really interesting matchup here. Jacob, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, this is one that I could realistically be pulled in either direction on. I think both these guys are really good fits for that DA archetype that you're looking for this Bears defense. I'll start with Halton. I think that, obviously him being a little bit smaller for a defensive tackle, he's still bigger than Robinson, but I was really impressed with, again, the quickness that he shows coming out of the gate, the short area acceleration, but also the chase down athleticism as well. I think that you see some of these stunts and just watching him chase down, say running backs in space or scrambling quarterbacks, you can see that agility that's better. It's certainly above average for the defensive tackle position. I know, back in 2024, he led all FBS defensive tackles who had a substantial enough pass rushing volume at 12.5% pass rush win rate, which especially a defensive tackle is really strong. I love the motor he plays with. So he's not just a fast guy. He's maximizing it by how hard he plays. He shows good, a good awareness working through blocks and sifting through at the line of scrimmage. I don't think he packs a massive punch necessarily at the point of attack. I don't think he's someone who's gonna drive too many offensive linemen back at the point of attack in the NFL. And I think that I think sometimes if people see, where they have, defensive tackles, they look at this, if they're schemed to have kind of like a read and react sort of game plan along the defensive line. It's like, oh, this guy's not very fast. That's not always the case. Like Halton, did that a good handful of times at Oklahoma from, what I was able to see. And you can still clearly tell, like when he's able to pin his ears back and you get after the quarterback, he's one of the fastest defensive linemen in this class and one of the most explosive for sure. So if I move to Landon Robinson, I really wish he got invited to the combine. He 100% should have gotten invited to the combine. And it really bums me out that he didn't, because I think he would have tested incredibly well. He was on Bruce Feldman's freak list going into this season, 700-pound squat, 465-pound bench, 350-pound power clean, and a 20.13 miles per hour top speed on tape. Came in as a linebacker at Navy and, made the transition pretty seamlessly to the defensive line. You're looking at, again, another extremely explosive, twitchy defensive lineman, someone who, yes, he's very small for his position, but I think he works within those parameters pretty well, and he doesn't have bad length relative to his size, which I think is helpful. Yeah, because he's smaller, I think he's going to struggle with double teams at the next level. I also don't expect him to see a ton of double teams. I think usually whichever defensive tackle he's going to be in there with is going to be a bigger player, and typically, especially early on, going to be a better player. So he's probably going to get a lot more one-on-one looks early on in his career. The lack of height helps in his weight distribution naturally. Low center of gravity, low pads. I keep going back and forth on this. I'm going to land on Halton here, specific to the Bears. I do have, a higher pre-draft grade on Halton just in general, not necessarily tying it to the Bears, but Robinson wouldn't surprise me at all, especially on in the fourth I know they don't have a fifth rounder right now because the DJ Moore trade up, but fourth round even, if they trade back and acquire a fifth round pick, or they trade up and acquire a fifth round pick, whatever that might look like, I think that'd be the sweet spot for Robinson personally. The size is definitely a concern, and that plays into the evaluation here, but I'm going with Halton, but I do like Robinson, and I think his tape's a ton of fun, and if the Bears end up with him, I'll be a very happy guy.
All right, Steve, you gonna give a split decision for me, or what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, why did these guys have to be in the first round? I feel like these, like this could, if they started on the opposite end of the brackets, this could have easily been the final. But yeah, I mean, both players are pretty similar skill sets. I mean, I'll start with Gracen. Explosive first step, like that's going to be his calling card in the NFL. He's going to have to win with that first step and getting it and just kind of shooting gaps and getting into the backfield. Excellent short area quickness. I think he does. He's not like Jacob said, like he's not going to be the best against double teams. That's not going to be really like his calling card. But I do think he plays with some natural leverage in one-on-one situations. I think he can kind of do what you said that Dennis Allen wants, kind of stack, read and react, and then get upfield if he needs to. I think he's more of a kind of a straight line athlete. More so than an elite, elite mover, lateral agility and everything like that. But he's not, bad in that regard at all. I think he had a really, really good Senior Bowl, and the one-on-ones are one thing. He did really great in that, but he also played really well in the game and also in the team drills, was really well, and that's kind of what sold me on him. I don't want to say lower on him, but he was like a guy I liked, but didn't love. But the Senior Bowl kind of really kind of cemented him as a guy I think is going to go higher than and has a lot more potential as well. With Landon Robinson, Landon Robinson is one of my favorite players in this entire draft. I mean, Jacob kind of, laid everything out perfectly. Just a little bit undersized, but he does have longer arms than Halton, actually. Halton has 31 and an eighth. Landon Robinson has 31 and 3/4. So they're both 293 pounds. The only difference is Landon Robinson is just over 5'11". But his tape is so much fun, man. Like the lateral agility, the quickness, the hand usage. I think he eats double teams better than a lot of these other guys, like at least more consistently. I mean, he's going to struggle with double teams in the NFL just because the guys he's going up against are going to be bigger and stronger. But he fights against them, and I'm not gonna rule him out of being like kind of that outlier that can succeed in the NFL. With both these guys, and the lack of length does show up, especially when they're tackling and just kind of shedding blocks. But I really like Landon Robinson, and yeah, I think we've agreed way too much on this podcast, so I'm gonna go Landon Robinson just to put the pressure on Q. You got to make a decision.
All right, so when I'm thinking this through, I'm looking at it like one of my thoughts is, can you afford to roster two guys the size of Grady Jarrett? That's tough to me because like you're one or two injuries away from Grady Jarrett and Landon Robinson being your starting defensive tackles, which is scary. But then at the same time, it's like you just said, Steve, Gracen Halton's the same weight.
Mm-hmm.
And Landon Robinson is that weight at a service academy where he has to make a certain weight every year. Like after football season, he has to cut back down. I forget what the weight is, but he has to cut back down to make weight. So I do think that, you might be able who knows how heavy Landon Robinson could be, man. Like who knows where this guy could end up in my mind when I'm looking at this athlete. I think I'm giving the tip to Landon Robinson, even though I think both are very likely. Just because I'm sitting here going, if they're both part-time players, right? Neither of them are 3-down guys. I can get one in the third or fourth round. The other I have to take in the second round. Maybe I might have to move up a little in the second round, even with this class to get them. I'm thinking Robinson makes more sense for me to go after at that point, even if it's in the third round. Like I feel like that's a better allocation of resources. And the real selling point for me is just the agility testing. That every defensive tackle that Dennis Allen goes after has outstanding agility. And Landon Robinson brings that to the table. I don't think Halton's is like his testing wasn't very good for his agility. I think he's more agile than his testing showed. But to me, Landon Robinson having that elite agility is the selling point here for me.
And I know real quick, I know it's, screenshots are frowned upon in football, on football Twitter and the, football analysis world. But when I saw that clip of him, or like that picture of him at his pro day, I don't remember what drill it was, but he was turning the corner and he got so low. It's not even just him being short. It's just how flexible his lower half is and how agile he is. This is one where I'm okay being on the losing end of this. I think I could realistically see either one of these guys in Chicago.
Right.
So Robinson's a guy that, he's a ton of fun to watch.
Yeah. Agreed. I mean, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer in this matchup. It's just one of these two guys is a very strong chance of being a Bear. But we're going to move on to our number 3 seed against our number 14 seed. At the 3 seed, we have Clemson defensive tackle Peter Woods. And at 14, we have Penn State D tackle Zane Durant. I'm going to toss this one to Steve first.
Yeah, I mean, Peter Woods going into the season, everyone kind of had him as a top 10 pick. He didn't really have the year everyone was hoping for, so he does kind of seem like he's in play for the Bears now. And I know people, even Bears fans, are getting kind of lower on him. I'm gonna be probably more in line with him being the pick at 25, because yeah, he's not the perfect prospect, but he does a lot of things well that you want. And in this draft class, where I think it's just frankly a weak draft class, you're probably not going to get a whole lot of star power at that pick 25. So if you can get a guy with Peter Woods' pedigree, pedigree, and then just abilities, I think that's a really solid selection. But yeah, brings over good overall size, impressive mobility and quickness. I think he's more of like a fluid mover maybe than like an elite athlete, but I think he's definitely a functional athlete. Strong upper body, powerful hands. Fires his hands quickly in keeping them tight to protect his chest. Doesn't let offensive linemen in his chest too often. Shows the ability to challenge double teams. I don't know if he's necessarily the best against double teams, but he could definitely hold his own. I think in one-on-one situations, he's one of the better run defenders in this class because he can stack and shed. Really good first step. Versatility too. Clemson played him like outside the tackle, rushing off the edge. In previous years, didn't do that as much this year. Maybe that's why his tape was fell off a little bit. But I think the fact that they were even felt comfortable playing outside the tackle is a good thing. The limited pass rush production, and still he's still developing there. I don't think he's ever going to be an elite pass rusher, and that's kind of if you're using a first round pick, you probably want a guy who's going to be an elite pass rusher. But I think he does have a little bit more room to grow there, even if he's not going to be an elite guy. His hand usage is still a work in progress. Like I said, a lot of these guys, he's not super tall, but he does have his pad level kind of go up at times. Short arms, definitely show up from time to time, especially as a tackler. And there were times where I think he tried to do like kind of like a Euro step, cross chop, and the lateral agility I just didn't think was really there for him to do that at a high level as a pass rusher in the NFL. But like I said, I think he's more of like a fluid mover than an elite athlete. But he did have a 1.67, 10-yard split. He didn't run the 40, but he did run the 10-yard split, which is pretty good, especially for a guy who's 300 pounds. And then with Durant, another guy. I mean, he's very similar to Landon Robinson, and Gracen Halton. He's kind of in that same vein. A guy who's undersized, 6'1", 290, but has a really good initial burst off the snap, and that's how he's got to have to win. He's going to have to get off the ball quickly and not let guys get their hands on him, because once they do get their hands on him, it's kind of the rep is over. So he's not. I'm probably going to be a little bit lower on Zane Durant, because while he is kind of the same size as Robinson or Holden, I thought Holden and Robinson, their size shows up, but not as often as it does for Durant. I thought his size limitations really kind of showed up a little bit too much. So I think he is. I think that being said, Durant is definitely a fit for the Bears. But if I have to pick one of these guys, I'm going to go with Peter Woods.
Jacob?
Yeah, I'm going to take Woods here, and I think, I'm in agreement with Steve. I think if you're looking at the 25th overall pick in this draft, I think in this class specifically, you're never going to find a flawless prospect. And I think that so many people, Bears fans, I love you, but I'll point to this specifically. They're like, oh, why would the Bears take a defensive tackle who didn't have a ton of sacks? Or why would the Bears take this edge rusher who has short arms or this guy who's 25 years, whatever. Like nobody's going to be flawless that you're taking at 25. You're accepting them at face value of, okay, this is a flawed prospect, but they have some really intriguing tools that project them well at the next level. I think Peter Woods fits that bill where, yeah, the pass rushing production wasn't amazing. And, especially in, 2025, the tape did drop off a little bit. And, he's got shorter arms, but I look at this defensive tackle class, and it's a lot of specialists to me. There's not a true blue chip in the bunch. I think if there's one guy who has the potential to be a 3-down starter the quickest in his NFL career, I think Peter Woods is that guy. And I think that a lot of it comes from he's intelligent and he's powerful in the run game. I really like what he brings to the table there. I think he can be a very effective 3 technique defensive tackle, stopping the run. Like Steve mentioned, Clemson had him moving around a bit. They have him rushing off the edge, kick him as a 5 tech, 4 tech, whatever the case may be. I'm in agreement where he's a fluid athlete. He's not as twitchy as a Landon Robinson or a Halton, but he has good short area quickness and he moves. He shows good control when he's out in space. If he has to chase down a quarterback in pursuit or he has to chase down a running back, and run support. I like what he brings to the table there. Durant, I think again could be a good fit for Chicago for sure. I'm in agreement too that the size issues do show up a little too much. Maybe that's partially because of he played the toughest competition compared to Robinson or I mean Halton played some really talented offensive linemen too, but I think Durant had some really really tough opponents up front, but Durant has, so that quickness as well. He's a little bit, lower to the ground. I like Durant as, like a round 3. I had him in like that round 3, round 4 range. So specific to Chicago, I'd be fine with him with that late 3rd round pick. I think Woods is a better run defender than Durant, and I think that Woods, maybe if he's not as twitchy, I think he's still an above average athlete for the defensive tackle position on tape. So I'm going with Woods here as well.
Yeah, it's funny. I've got a glut of like 7 or 8 defensive tackles in that round 3, round 4, like lit right there, which is just, it feels like way too many, but it's like I keep trying to adjust and I just keep ending up at the same spot. Peter Woods, I mean, I think you guys said it all really well already, but one thing that I thought was interesting was, and I'm not sure how like how much this is true. This is what I wrote in my notes because it felt this way watching it. I thought he played at a heavier weight in 2024. And he didn't have it as much. Like you could definitely tell that he didn't have the same lateral juice that he had in 2025, which was interesting because I feel like I read something that said the opposite. But the games that I watched in 24 versus 25 felt that way to me. I thought that he did a better job taking on double teams and stuff like that in 24, which I don't know if that's almost a strength to me because I feel like it's a guy with a malleable frame who can become multiple different things for your defense, and it's what do you want him to become? So I mean, Peter Woods I think is an easy pick here. I just wanted to mention that because I don't think you guys had hit on anything kind of along those lines. I think the possibilities for Woods are pretty wide.
Yeah, and the other thing about Woods is he was really really good as a true freshman in the ACC. And that I put a lot of stock in those guys who come in and more than hold their own when they're 18 years old. Like that's, even though I think his maybe tape was even better than it was this last year, and maybe he did add some weight, whatever it was, but that tells me that there's more there.
Yeah. All right, so let's move this on to our next matchup. The 7-10 7 seed, we have Domonique Orange out of Iowa State, and 10 seed we have Dontay Corleone out of Cincinnati. Toss one to Jacob first.
Yeah, so this is another one where it's very interesting that these two are going up against each other. I look at both of them. I don't necessarily get the sense that either one of them is going to be a seamless fit in Chicago. Some similar strengths, some similar weaknesses here. I'll start with Big Citrus, Domonique Orange. Again, that's my favorite nickname of any prospect in this draft class, which I love that. But yeah, tremendous, weight room strength, 650-pound squat, 450-pound bench. It's tested as having, a 34-inch vertical in at least I have in my notes, over the off season at Iowa State. I don't have his combine numbers in front of me, but I think that I like what he brings to the table as far as just his natural strength. I mean, those weight room numbers show up on tape sometimes where you see when he latches on properly, he gets his hands right. He's got that really good grip strength. He's shown he can rush the passer in a 3 technique alignment, but I think his frame just screams nose tackle. Personally, like he's got good length. He's a little bit shorter, a little bit squattier for a defensive tackle. I see some solid hand activity as he's working and sifting through blocks. I think there's still some inconsistency on a down by down basis perspective. I think that he's very much a rotational player, at least early on in his career. I think that whenever you get down blockers or reach blockers going up against him, depending on what his alignment is, he doesn't stand his ground necessarily as well as I'd hope for a guy who's as big as he is. I think part of that comes down to just the footwork and the body control. There's some instances where he can pop up a little bit upright at the point of attack as well. I like what Orange brings to the table. I think he has some solid raw quickness for such a big dude. And I think that the strength is there. It's just I want to see more consistency. And then Corleone, I see some of the same, honestly. Like he has that squatty, stereotypical kind of nose tackle build. He's a really productive player. As a redshirt freshman at Cincinnati, had a pretty solid, consistent presence in that defense over the course of his time in college. I like the raw power that he brings to the table as well. Even if he's not the tallest or necessarily the fastest. At the combine, he was 6'1", 340 pounds. That is what I want to call him isn't safe for it's not PG, but you can fill in the blanks from there. He's a short, wide man. I like what he brings to the table. Yeah. There. Yeah. So, heavy hands, strong anchor. I like that. Maybe there's a little bit more contact balance. I feel like working with Corleone as opposed to Orange. But yeah, I don't think the athleticism is tremendous. I know he is a blood clot to his name from back in 2024. The short area quickness is solid. It lacks significant agility, and I don't think he pushes the pocket incredibly well as a pass rusher. This one can go either way for me. I look at it, and they could be either one of these guys could be solid run defenders at the next level, but I don't know how well they fit Chicago. I'm leaning Orange here, but I could probably go either way on this one.
Steve, how about you?
Yeah, I'm probably leaning Orange too. But yeah, they're very similar players. Going to probably fill similar roles in the NFL. But yeah, with Orange, really good frame, shows solid burst off the snap. He's going to probably going to be making his living as a two gapper, but I do think he offered a little bit more, a utility maybe in a one gap scheme, but really good, with his hands, really powerful hands, upper body strength is, off the chart. Keeps his feet moving through contact. He can even make, tackles through contact, which is good. I do think that he's a little bit slow to disengage. And like Jacob said, the balance issues, he's kind of just on the ground a little bit too much, plays with a narrow base, pad level rises a little bit. Pass rush production, isn't anything to write home about. I don't think he's going to be a great pass rusher in the NFL, but he could maybe be a guy who, pushes the pocket a little bit. And then with Corleone, a lot of the similar stuff, like outstanding upper body strength. Wide. He actually probably does a better job, like Jacob said, of with his balance, maintaining a wide base at the point of attack. He's just going to be a guy who just takes up space and eats blockers. That's going to be what he does in the NFL. That's what he did in college. Really impressive player for a guy who's 6'1", 340 pounds. I thought he played maybe a little bit lighter previously, but like Jacob said, he had that blood clot issue in 24, I think it was. I don't know if he put on, I feel like he put on some bad weight after that. So he definitely carries some bad weight around the middle, but I think this is going to be a guy. I mean, my comp for him is probably going to be like Andrew Billings. I think that's kind of what you're hoping for. And Andrew Billings did develop into a much better pass rusher than he was, coming out of college. Coming out of college, he was just a run stuffer. I don't know if Corleone can get to that level, but we just saw that Dennis Allen doesn't really want Andrew Billings. So I feel like that's kind of what you're getting here. So a good player. I just don't know if it's a fit for the Bears. So I'm going to go Orange.
Yeah. So I mean, I think the with Andrew Billings would be 2025 Andrew Billings, not 2024, 2023
Right.
Andrew Billings. At which I don't know if people realize this. Andrew Billings had an 89th percentile broad jump.
I don't believe you.
He had an
You're making that
insane.
up.
I mean, he was 311 pounds coming out of in the combine, so he was lighter, but like
But
he
still.
has wild burst. Like that's why he fit Eberflus's scheme so well, because he could one gap shoot the gap like nobody's business at the size he was. But that being said, I don't think Corleone has that same type of burst there, so that's why I said 2025 Billings. Like I could see that. I'm fine with going with Orange here. My initial thought was probably Corleone because I think you could get him in the 5th round, and that's where Dennis Allen tends to invest in nose tackles is the late day 3 picks. But either way, I'm generally fine here. Like I don't think either of these guys are strong fits for the Bears, so I'm fine with just moving this on to our 2 versus 15 seed. At the 2 seed, we have out of Florida, Caleb Banks. And at the 15 seed out of Tennessee, Bryson Eason. And I'm going to toss this one to Jacob first because you turned me on to Bryson Eason.
Yeah, so I think that this is definitely an interesting matchup for sure. With Banks, you're looking at a more, a flashier prospect for sure. And I think the better overall prospect, regardless of scheme fit. I mean, guys 6'6", close to 330 pounds with 35-inch arms, massive hands. A guy who moves the way he does for that size, really impressive. Uh, I think, you see the short area quickness when he has the chance to, pin his ears back and go after the quarterback is, really encouraging. Uh, Looked really good at the Senior Bowl, which I think is encouraging. I mean, I know that he had the broken foot that caused him to, miss time during the 2025 season, and he had another one at the combine after the fact. Ran well at the combine. 504 at that size with a 176 10-yard split is really good for a dude who's pushing 330 pounds, but definitely upright as you're going to get with a guy who's that tall. I think, the high hips, waist bender sort of playing style, it comes back to haunt him sometimes as a run defender, where you see too many missed tackles just because he can't break down super well and, wrap up with proper pad level, even being a bigger guy. But the raw play strength is there. I think he's got heavy hands. He can knock guys around to the point of attack. He's quick for such a big dude. Eason, though, like I said, I have Banks as definitely the higher rated prospect overall, but Eason might end up being a better fit for Chicago a little bit. Just, him being compare the two, like Banks he's 6'6", Eason's 6'2", still has, over 33-inch arms, 10-inch hands. He's proportioned well. And even, he's a little bit shorter, but he's got like kind of that squatty frame. And I look at him and I see someone who he's got some intriguing short area burst for a squattier guy. I think his first step is pretty good, all things considered. There's raw athleticism there and raw strength needed to stand his ground and to not get swallowed up as a run defender. I think that, there's also some intriguing hand quickness there too, where I don't think necessarily he has the most refined pass rushing plan, especially if he doesn't win initially. I think his counters leave a lot to be desired, but I like some of the quickness and the activity that he shows up front. That makes me think that, all right, he has that. He has some solid short area athleticism for his size. There's room for him to grow as a pass rusher, even being an older prospect. I think that there's some potential there. So dare I say we have a 15-2 upset here. At least in my vote. Banks is certainly a higher rated prospect for me, but when you consider the question about Banks, how well is he going to fit in this system, given his pad level issues, given his, his missed tackles in the run game, and given the fact he has 2 broken feet in, the last calendar year, those are concerns to me. And Eason, you could get him a little bit later. Give me Eason. Give me Eason here.
I'm with you, Jacob. I mean, a few weeks ago we had you came on the Bears on Tap podcast and we talked some about Caleb Banks. I told you then, like, he was my DT1 in this class, and I have had to since change that since finding out he broke his foot again, because that lowers a guy's floor for me a ton. Like, injury once, sure, but he's had a broken foot twice at 330 pounds. Like, that is terrifying to me. I had to lower his floor to just a guy who's barely in the NFL, because that's a real possibility for a guy who keeps breaking his foot with stress fractures. So now he's like DT4 for me. Like, it's still up there, but like it's still not as high as I was on him. But I love the player still. I think he's out. I hope the best for him. I hope the Bears don't draft him, because the Bears are not in a position where they can take that risk right now. They need someone who can contribute. Bryson Eason, though, like, I was really impressed with this guy's tape. Like, I think I have a high 4th round grade on him right now, and I think that like, I'll take that value all day, because I think he's a guy who can jump in, contribute day one. I think he shows, like, Dennis Allen likes his dogs, right? Like, he likes guys who have that all out mentality. I think Bryson Eason fits that to a T. His testing was shockingly awful. His shuttle was just like awful and dragged down his RAS. But that burst showed up in his athletic testing with a good broad jump. And, I'm curious your guys' thoughts on this. I've noticed it with a few guys who have a really good 10-yard split, but a poor broad, or maybe just an average broad, or like an outstanding broad, but a poor 10-yard split. Like, how do you weigh that? Because I see those as measuring the same thing.
Yeah, that's tough. I don't have a good answer for you. I wish I did. I think sometimes it's like with some of these, especially these like big guys, they're not getting, like, I don't know, they're not track athletes. So they're not always getting into like a 40-yard dash, stance. So I think that might just be sometimes if they have like I don't know if they I was gonna say if they have a bad 10-yard split, but then good jumps, that could be it. It's just they're just not comfortable
Yeah, just
doing
kind
that.
of
But
like
I
one or
honestly,
the other. Like,
right, yeah. I don't really have a good answer for you, but I 100% agree. Those are supposed to be measuring the same thing as explosiveness, and yeah, so it's weird to see a guy who has one but not the other.
All right, well, I'm gonna go ahead and put Bryson Eason through, because we got 2. But Steve, do you want to add anything about either of these guys?
Yeah, so I haven't watched Eason. I'm gonna hopefully get to him this weekend. But I'll just so I don't have anything to add there. But one thing, I do have one thing to add. You mentioned his agilities, bring it on his RAS. I'm gonna say shout out to any of these guys who actually do the agilities, because there's a bunch of guys who, if they did the agilities, their RAS would get dragged down, but they just don't do it. So shout out to that. But with Caleb Banks, yeah, I mean, you guys kind of covered. I won't add, I won't get too much into the weeds on that because you guys covered a lot of it. But my one thing with him is this is a guy with rare physical traits, huge size, 35-inch arms, rare, athletic ability. Who knows what his RAS score would be if he didn't do it on a broken foot. So with that, it's like I wish he dominated on a more consistent basis, because he's bigger, stronger, more athletic than everyone, and he definitely had times of domination. But I wanted to see him just do it more often. If you are this, freak athlete, why aren't you absolutely dominating every rep you go against? Like, he had definitely had games like the LSU game in 24, really stands out. That was probably one of his best games. That was a dominant performance. Why wasn't he able to do that a little bit more often? That's just my one thing with Caleb Banks. But if he didn't break his foot, I would be kind of pounding the table for him at 25, because I do think he's the guy that, like, this is someone who is available at the end of the first round, and also has the sky's the limit for this guy. This could be the best D tackle in football. But yeah, what with the injuries, I don't know. Probably a little bit further down.
All right, well, Steve, we are going back up to the top of the bracket now. Kayden McDonald, Rayshaun Benny. Who is more likely to be a Chicago Bear?
If you asked me this a week ago, I probably would have said Benny. Even though I don't think he's a perfect fit, I didn't think he's a good fit. But now that I think we have to say that they're at least entertaining the thought of drafting McDonald. So I'll go with, I don't know. I could go either way on this. I'll go with McDonald. But if you guys have a convincing argument the other way, I could easily change my mind.
Jacob?
Yeah, I mean, I'll take McDonald here too. Honestly, I think I'm kind of in the same boat where it's like I don't know if either of these guys are perfect fits necessarily, but I think McDonald is Yeah, I think he'd still be really good value at 25, and I think that he's so good against the run to where you can justify, at least in my opinion, maybe want to overlook, okay, perfect scheme fit. I know that that's, it's very valuable to have for sure, but I think McDonald's good enough to the point where, they're doing the research on him. They clearly have, something, they care enough to want to answer some questions. So I'd go with McDonald here for sure.
Right. If he's on their board. Like
Yeah.
the whole question was, would he even be on their board? And he's obviously on their board if they're doing this research. So
Right.
I'm with you guys. I think Kayden McDonald is the right answer there. Now, Jacob, tossing it to you. How about the DeMonte Capehart versus Christen Miller?
So I'm gonna ask you guys a quick question here for how I should approach this. Should I go with this as best fit for the Bears or most likely to get drafted by the Bears?
I'd say most likely. Like if you were going to put money on it, which of these players is going to be a Chicago Bear?
Okay. So then in that case, I think I'll go Capehart on this one. And my thinking is, look, I think Miller is a superior prospect. I think that, like I said, if they take him at 25, I'll be completely okay with that. I think I get the sense that might be a little too rich to take him at. I think if he goes round 1, it's going to be a little bit later in round 1. Maybe could end up being, like early round 2. Whereas Capehart, he's someone you don't have to take until the 3rd or 4th round probably. I think that there's a higher chance of that than them using their first overall pick on a guy like Miller. So I'm taking Capehart here. Both are very talented players. Like I said, I like Miller a lot. I'd be perfectly happy with him at 25. I don't think that's the direction they do go. So for that, I'm going to say Capehart.
Okay. Steve?
Yeah, this one's tough. I agree with everything that Jacob said. Capehart does just kind of seem like a Ryan Poles guy. Like I feel like Ryan Poles is gonna love Capehart, but I do think Dennis Allen would like Miller more. So I'm gonna go with Miller. I mean, I agreed with everything that Jacob said, but I'll go with Miller because I do think that he could easily. I not easily, but I think he could be the pick at 25. I'll go with Miller. It's a toss up though. It's close.
I'm this is going out on a limb. I'm skeptical that Christen Miller gets to 25. And I know that's counter to what you just said, Jacob, about like you did, but I really, I look at the rest of this class and I go back to what I said: smart, athletic, violent. I'm not sure he gets there. So if he does, I'll be elated. But I'm gonna go with Capehart just because I'm not sold that Christen Miller will be available.
Okay.
All right, now we are going to the Landon Robinson versus Peter Woods matchup.
Ooh.
Steve, what are you thinking here?
Man, Landon Robinson just going through like the gauntlet right now. Like such a fun player. I want to put him through. I mean, both fit really well. I don't know. Peter Woods is definitely in play with the Bears at 25, but do they want to use their first round pick on a guy who maybe isn't going to be a great pass rusher, where you can get Landon Robinson? I know we said like we were talking on Twitter earlier, like maybe 89 is in play, but I think he could be potentially available later. I know Jacob, you said like 4th, 5th round. Like, so if you can get Landon Robinson at 129, let's say, like I think they would be so happy about that. Like, I'm gonna go Landon Robinson.
Okay. Jacob.
Yeah, this is another really tough matchup. Landon Robinson's just getting, heavyweight matchup after heavyweight matchup. But which is ironic because the guys he's facing are a little lighter. But anyway, I think that this could really go either way. God. Okay. I'll take Woods. I'll take Woods here. And I agree. I think there's, a lot of validity in what Steve said for sure. And I agree that like if Robinson's there in, if he's there in like the 4th or 5th round, I think they'd be ecstatic. My only question with him is, admittedly, I have no idea where the league sees Robinson going. And I think that makes it tougher to project him a little bit. I mean, and the Bears don't have a 5th round as it stands currently. If they acquire one, hell yeah. But I think the fact that he didn't get invited to the combine, I know that, non-combine invites get drafted, in a pretty decent amount. You usually get 20, 25 of them or so. And Robinson, I expect, will definitely be one of them. But just because I find it difficult to project exactly where he's going to go, whereas with Woods, I think you have a little more clarity. I'm going to go with Woods on that end. Again, if Robinson's the pick, if Robinson ends up being a pick and, fourth round, I'd be ecstatic. If they get a fifth rounder, I'd be ecstatic. Third rounder, I think it's a little steep for me, but I definitely see the vision. And I think for a guy who fits the system, I could be talked into it. But just because of how broad of a range there is with him, I think Woods is a safer pick. So I'm going with Woods here.
Yeah, and I'm gonna have to go with Woods here just because I think kind of counter to it. Like what I was just saying about Christen Miller, I think he's gonna be on most teams' draft boards. Like I think he's gonna be a real option no matter the scheme. I'm not sure I can say the same about Peter Woods. I think he's a more scheme dependent like player from a size trait standpoint. And I think he fits the Bears. So like if he's at 25, I think they're going to take him. So I think that there's a good chance he gets there. Whereas with Landon Robinson, I really like the way you put that, Jacob. There's a lot of mystery in where you're even going to be able to get him. So that just generally makes it tougher to project in my mind. But moving on to the final one in this round, we have Big Citrus going up against Bryson Eason. And Jacob, where are you going?
What was it a couple of years ago? Was it St. Peter's who made it to the Sweet 16 as a 15 seed? I think we might have to go with that because, I mean, like we talked about with Orange and Corleone, I don't think either of them are seamless fits in what the Bears need to do. Maybe there are better fits than Eason too, but I think Eason matches a little bit better. He's a little bit more explosive. He's a little bit more consistent in terms of his, control as an athlete than Orange is. So I'm taking Eason here personally.
Steve, do you want to give an opinion on this?
Well, I mean, I just based on what you guys have said about Eason and what I know about Orange, I don't feel like Orange is a good fit. Like, I'll pick Eason. I reserve the right to change that when I watch Eason this weekend. I'll make sure I tweet at both of you and say you guys are idiots for having Eason that far. But I'll go with
I was going Eason either way. So,
yeah.
Steve, back to you. We got back to the top in our final four here. We have Kayden McDonald against DeMonte Capehart. How you feeling?
I feel kind of the same way I did with McDonald versus Benny. Like a week ago, I said Capehart, no problem. But he's on their Kayden McDonald is on their board. They need to be better at defensive tackle stuff in the run. But then Jacob brought up good points last time with Capehart. You can get much later. I'll go with Capehart. No, I'm gonna go McDonald. I'm switching it up. It's McDonald.
Ooh.
Oh, okay.
All right,
Jacob.
No, I dig that. Honestly, I think it's
my biggest question was, is he going to be on their board? And he's clearly on their board. So that's kind of where I'm landing, to simplify.
Yeah, I think that's valid. I do. I don't know. I'm still gonna lean Capehart here. I think it's purely from a system perspective. I'll point back to you could get him a little bit later. I know. I don't know. And McDonald, again, I'd be very happy if they take him at 25. I'm not worried about, I'm not as pressed on the fact that he's not a seamless scheme fit, but I think that with the value that could be there at edge at 25, with the value that could be there, for defensive backs at 25, I think that there are a lot of different variables. McDonald might not even be there at 25. I mean, you don't know for sure. So I'm going to take Capehart here, but I mean, again, I think this is another one that could go either way, and if the Bears do take McDonald, I'll be happy personally.
Yeah, I'm gonna go Capehart here, and it more than anything, it's about McDonald's competing with Akeem Mesidor, Keldrick Falk, all these different players like Dylan Tieneman, EMW. There's a bunch of guys who I feel like if one of them falls, they're gonna go ahead of McDonald.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's not that risk with Capehart, and I don't know. I feel I'm gonna save the next thing I was gonna say for the next round, but I think I'm going with Capehart here.
Okay.
All right, and then second matchup of our final four, we got Peter Woods against Bryson Eason. Jacob.
Man, I'm gonna take Woods here. I'm gonna take Woods, and I know that I just mentioned, the possibilities of edge rushers or defensive backs there at 25 that Woods would have to compete with. I feel more at least compared to McDonald, I feel more confident that Woods would be heavily considered at 25, and I think we're seeing now that there's enough divide where I feel like there's a solid chance that he'll be there at 25. I'm taking Woods. I think Eason, he's a good player and a good fit. The only problem is I don't know if the Bears wait that just exactly that long to take a defensive tackle. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Steve, do you have any thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean Woods is just such a good fit for what the Bears want. I think I would be. Yeah, I know I haven't watched Eason, but I would be surprised if he's a better fit than Woods.
All right, so now we are in the final with some Clemson on Clemson crime. And it clearly Dennis Allen loved what he got out of Brian Brzee. He's all about the Clemson guys, is what we're thinking. But we got DeMonte Capehart against Peter Woods. And I mean, my thought here is this is a clear Peter Woods pick. But what do you do you guys have differing thoughts there?
No, I was gonna go with Woods. I mean, even if you just look at just like their physical profile, like you tweeted out where the defensive tackles that Dennis Allen has drafted, none of them have been over 300 pounds, and he's close to 315 and 6'5". So like Peter Woods, just from a physical standpoint, fits well, and then what you were asking him to do fits well too. I think he's the winner.
Yeah, Jacob.
Yeah, I was gonna go Woods either way, so it makes my decision easy.
All right, so most likely defensive tackle to be a Chicago Bear, Peter Woods. Gentlemen, starting with Jacob, do you want to let anyone who's watching, listening know where they can find your work?
Yeah, definitely. So you can find me like my general NFL draft stuff and just general NFL stuff is over at PFSN at profootballnetwork.com. So you guys can check that out. Please use our mock draft simulator, please. It's very fun and it's free, so hell yeah. But yeah, so as far as my Bears specific stuff, you can find that over at Windy City Gridiron. I just put out a mock draft yesterday over there. So, it's fun either way, but that's where you guys can find me. And then my little handle for those of you who have the video on is at Jacob Infante 24.
Steve?
Yeah, most of my stuff's on Twitter, so just follow me on Twitter at CFC Bears. Tweet a lot of just draft videos for building the board, and I do a podcast with Usaid Koshal that is the Hallis Beat podcast, so at Hallis Beat.
All right, guys, thank you so much for joining me and talking about defensive tackles in this class. Those of you watching, listening, thank you guys for your time, for hanging with us here, and we hope you guys have a great rest of your day, evening, whatever it is, and bear down.
Bear down.